Hi, this is Charlie from Vintage Speed. This is our second in our series on rebuilding the Stromberg 97. This also holds true for the 81 and the 48, basically. We've got our carburetor all cleaned, and we're ready to start assembling it. You want to make sure that you checked your top screw holes. These are on Stromberg's. All of the threads are coarse. On the Hollies, all the threads are fine. So this uses a 1024 screw in your top. Make sure your top screws are good. If they're not, they need to be helicoiled. Also on the fuel inlets, make sure your fuel inlet threads are good. If they're not good, then you can send us the body and we can do a helicoil for you. Or if you're already oversized, we can fix it like this by inserting a metal sleeve and put it back to stock thread, so that it actually, this makes it better than it was originally, because you're never going to strip out the steel bushing that we insert in there. So we can do that. This runs $20. The helicoil runs $15, plus the shipping to get it back to you. So if you need it done, let us know. We can also helicoil any of the screw holes that are bad in the carburetor. Okay. For this video, we're just going to do the bowl section. So we're going to start out with the bowl. We're going to go and install our emulsion tubes back in it. And I told you in the last video that you have to be really careful on these emulsion tubes, that somebody hasn't tightened it down against this flange. They tighten the jets too tight, and what they do is they pinch off the holes. You see how these are pinched off? And the original emulsion tubes had 4 holes. The newer carburetors used ones with 2 holes. We also make a reproduction emulsion tube that has 2 holes in it. So if you've got bad tubes, this is where your idle fuel passes through. If these are pinched off, you won't get fuel through there. So you want to check that and make sure that's a problem that happens quite often. Okay, to reinsert your emulsion tubes, we're going to use the same little extractor that we took the tube out with. And when we took them out, we tapped that tube inside 2 or 3 turns with the emulsion tube removal kit, which we have. This is installed. It can be installed correctly or 180 degrees out. You want to put the tube in so the beveled end, the pie cut end, is facing down. So this would be facing down. You insert the emulsion tube in the carburetor and snap it into place. Usually after everything's cleaned, they'll go right back in with no problem. The bevel, the pie cut end down. Sometimes you have to give them a little tap to get them to go in and seat. Okay, now if your tubes are in correctly, it should look just like this. You should just see the tube with the pie cut facing down, and about that much, 1/4 of an inch of the tube protruding out. Okay, now we're going to install our jets. The standard jet in a Stromberg 97 was a 045 at sea level. If you're at a higher altitude, there's a chance you may need to cut down on your jet size. Usually the standard rule is anything over 1,500 feet, we go down 1 jet size for every 1,000 feet. Okay, so we're going to use our jet well. This is our improved jet well wrench, which has a hex head on the end. The one thing that you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you don't tighten your jets down too tight. So we're going to screw the jets in until they're flush up against the tube. And we're going to take this is made to accept a 1/4 inch wrench, and just snug the jet down. Need to be too tight. Okay, now we're going to install our jet well plugs. Okay, the standard jet well plug had a slotted end. We also make this in a slotted end in the standard thread, a new exactly like the originals. We make the center plug and it's slotted in just like the originals. We also make these in 10mm 125, which is slightly oversized. And all you have to do is, if you want to put our oversized one in, is you take a 10mm 125 tap, and you don't have to drill it, you just run it in there and cut your threads in where it'll accept the plugs and screw them right in. I might add too that we also make these plugs in standard and oversized with a hex head on them if you want to use a wrench on them. Okay, we're going to the other thing, all of the kits come with the red fiber washers. We don't use the red fiber washers. We use a nylon washer on there. If you've got any porosity or any scratches or anything in this mating surface, the red fiber washers are real hard, and you'll get that leaking and that bleeding out on the side of your carburetor, which you don't want. So you want to go ahead and if you use the nylon washers, they have what we call embeddability. When you tighten it down, it'll actually smear that nylon right down into the any scratch or porosity that you have there, and it'll seal it. And we find that these are much better for keeping your carburetors from having leaks. Okay, there's your two outer jet well plugs in. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the check valve. This is the pump inlet check valve. It has a little steel ball in there, and it drops right down in there, and that screws into place. You don't need to tighten it down real tight. Just screw it in until it's snug, and then your check valve plug goes right in here on the end. And tighten those down. Okay, that's completed. Now you got your emulsion tubes in, you got your jets in. The next thing we're going to install is we're going to install the idle pickup tubes. You want to make sure that your little holes on your idle pickup tubes are clear. Blow them out. There's a cross hole here in them. Sometimes you'll find that these are boogered up when you go to take them out. You can take a little diamond cut Dremel tool and cut you a new slot in it if you have to. Also, sometimes if they don't want to come out, apply a little heat right here to the outside edge with a propane torch, and that'll usually cause them to come free. The biggest thing you want to remember on these are old carburetors, so the ideal thing to remember is do no harm. In other words, you don't want to end up doing something to it that's going to cause you a problem. All right, we got our pickup tubes in it. The next thing we're going to do is insert our power valve. The power valve, there's a special tool made for the power valve. It has a notch cut in the middle that allows that pin in the middle, and it's centered over the power valve. If you don't have one, you can take a wide screwdriver and cut you a notch in the center of it, and that's generally what we use to put them in. You want to be real careful on this stem. If this stem gets bent at all, what will happen is it'll cause the power valve to leak, and the car will run excessively rich. Same with the power valve. You don't need to wrench down on it. Just tighten it down until it's flush and just give it just a little more. Okay, that completes that part. Now we're going to go to the float assembly. The needle and seat for these carburetors in the kits, except for my kits, which come with both these gaskets, we never use the red fiber washer for the same reason. If there's any porosity around here or any little scratches, it'll cause you to have leakage. We use the nylon on that. So you put your washer on, insert your needle and seat, I might add that I make this needle and seat 3 or 4 different styles. We have a needle and seat that accepts 1/8" pipe thread, so you can screw a standard pipe thread in it. We also make a needle and seat that is 5/16 hose barb, and we make a needle and seat that is 3/8 hose barb. So you can use either one of these in place of the stock needle and seat. Okay. once your needle's in. Okay, to check your float. This is a real simple procedure, and this works on all brass floats. Take your float, get you a pan, bring a pan of water to a boil. Take your pliers, submerge the float down in the boiling water. If you don't see any bubbles, the float's good. If any float that's got any kind of leak in it, it'll bubble out. What happens is the hot water heats the air inside the float and blows it out through the hole. So make sure your float's good, because if you end up with a heavy float, you'll end up with a problem. Okay, a lot of the float pins are boogered up. I also make that float pin brand new. You want to put a little, we use liquid Teflon, put a little Teflon on the threads of the float pin and insert your float in with the liquid Teflon on the float pin. And go ahead and screw your float pin in until it bottoms out. It has a place on the bottom that actually seals against the inside here, and it will seal without putting liquid Teflon on it, but we like to put a little on it. Okay, that's basically your bowl. On your float adjustment, when this is properly adjusted, the float is down 1/4 inch from the top of the bowl. The float, all our kits come with a gauge. You can set it on it. That's for dry setting your float. As we get later into the video, I'll show you how we set them here. We wet set them. Originally, Stromberg wet set them. They had a pitot tube that screwed into this jet well plug, and a little glass tube run up the side, and it had a mark on it that was a 1/2 inch down below the bowl. And you could put the tube in there and fill the bowl up and run the car and see what it was. The downfall to that is it makes a heck of a mess. The second thing is if you've got to do any adjustments, you still got to pull the top off. So on these things, and I might add a word of caution on this that I'm going to tell you, this carburetor will run on the car with the top off to do a wet setting on your float. If you have an electric fuel pump, you don't have to worry about starting the motor. Just leave the top off, turn the fuel pump on. When the fuel comes up and stabilizes, check with a ruler to see if it's a 1/2 inch down from the bowl. If it's not, you bend this little tang right here until you get the fuel level stabilized. Sometimes if it's too high, I sop a little fuel out of the bowl with a rag, and then you get it adjusted so your fuel's exactly 1/2 inch down from the top of the bowl. Okay, if all of that's done, then we're going to be ready here on this particular carburetor to put the base back on it. We'll do our testing on our squirters and stuff in the next video. Thank you.